Sarah. Chen had learned early in her nursing career that coma patients could hear everything. The textbooks were uncertain, the doctors non-committal, but she believed it in her bones. So every morning at 6 a.m., when she entered the private suite on the hospital's top floor to bathe the unconscious man in bed 7, she talked to him like he was awake. She told him about her student loans, her mother's failing health, the stray cat that waited for her outside her apartment. She sang off-key while changing his IV bags. She described the sunrise through his window in colors he couldn't see, and she never, not once, treated him like the comatose millionaire the rest of the staff whispered about. To Sarah, he was just Mr. Harrison, a human being who deserved dignity, even in silence. What she didn't know was that inside that motionless body, James Harrison heard every single word. The accident had made headlines 6 months ago. Tech mogul James Harrison, founder of Harrison Industries and one of the wealthiest men under 40, had crashed his Porsche into a divider on the Pacific Coast Highway. No drugs, no alcohol, just exhaustion from another 18-hour workday. The impact had sent his brain into a deep protective shutdown. His family had spared no expense, securing him the finest private room at Mercy General. But as weeks turned to months with no improvement, even they began to visit less frequently. His ex-fiancée had stopped coming altogether after the first month. Her parting words to the nursing staff cold and clinical. "Call me if anything changes." Sarah had been assigned to James's care rotation 3 months into his coma. Fresh out of nursing school and drowning in debt, she'd taken every shift she could get, including the early morning slots no one else wanted. The pay was barely enough to cover her rent and her mother's, experimental cancer treatments, but Sarah had never been motivated by money. She'd become a nurse. For the same reason she rescued wounded birds and donated to homeless shelters, despite having nothing to spare, because she believed that kindness was the only currency that truly mattered. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," she said that Wednesday morning, the pale October light filtering through the blinds. "It's Sarah. I'm going to take care of you now, okay? Let's get you cleaned up and comfortable." She worked with practiced efficiency but gentle hands, filling the basin with warm water, testing the temperature against her wrist like she would for a baby. She'd learned from the older nurses how to bathe a bedridden patient with respect, preserving their modesty with careful draping, moving each limb as if they might feel everything even if they couldn't respond. "You know, Mr. Harrison, I read this article about you once," she said, wringing out the washcloth. "Before the accident, it said you were ruthless in business, that you'd crush competitors without a second thought. But I don't think that's the whole story." She gently cleaned his face. "Careful around the feeding tube. I think maybe you forgot how to be soft. This world does that sometimes, especially to people who are trying to build something. It makes you put up armor until you forget there's still skin underneath." Inside his frozen mind, James wanted to scream. He wanted to tell her she was right. He wanted to explain that he'd spent 15 years building an empire, sacrificing relationships, health, and happiness, only to realize in those final seconds before the crash that he couldn't. Remember the last time he'd done something just because it was kind. The last time he'd helped someone who couldn't offer anything in return. "The thing is," Sarah continued, massaging lotion into his hands to prevent bed sores, "I don't think it's ever too late to change. My mom always says every sunrise is a chance to begin again. That's why I love these early morning shifts. Everything feels possible when the world's still waking up." She hummed a melody as she worked, something soft and melodic that James's unconscious mind clung to like a lifeline. He'd been trapped in this dark limbo for so long, aware but unable to move, unable to signal that he was still in here. Most of the staff treated him like furniture, efficient but detached. His brother had stopped talking to him after the second month, just sat in silence scrolling through his phone. But this young nurse, with the gentle hands and endless compassion, spoke to him like a friend, like he mattered beyond his bank account. "Almost done," Sarah said. "Just need to change your bedding. I'm going to roll you on your side now. I've got you." She supported his weight carefully, her small frame stronger than it looked from years of manual labor. As she tucked fresh sheets under him, she noticed something she'd never seen before, a small scar on his shoulder, blade shaped like a crescent moon. "You've got a story here," she murmured, tracing it lightly. "I wonder what happened Maybe you climbed trees as a kid and fell out of one. Or maybe you got it doing something brave, protecting someone else. I'd like to think it's something like that. She had no way of knowing she was exactly right. James had gotten that scar at 12, pushing his younger sister out of the way of a broken swing set that had collapsed. It was perhaps the last purely selfless thing he'd done before ambition had consumed him. As Sarah finished her work and prepared to leave, she did what she did every morning. She took his hand in hers and squeezed gently. "You keep fighting, Mr. Harrison. I believe you're still in there. And I believe you have more life to live. Important life. The kind that matters." That night, James's brain finally began to wake up. The doctors would later call it spontaneous recovery, a neurological mystery that defied their predictions. But James knew the truth. It was her voice that had pulled him back. Her belief in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. The moment he could move his fingers, he squeezed. An alarm began to sound. Within minutes, his room flooded with doctors and specialists, their excited voices overlapping as they examined him. He drifted in and out, overwhelmed by sensation after so much nothingness. When he finally opened his eyes fully 2 days later, the first person he asked for was Sarah. "The morning nurse," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "Young woman. Talks about sunrises." The floor supervisor looked confused. "Sarah Chen? She's just a junior nurse, Mr. Harrison. Are you certain you don't want—" "Sarah," he insisted. They found her on her day off, at her mother's bedside in the oncology ward 3 floors down. She'd been reading aloud from a worn paperback, her mother sleeping peacefully beside her, when her supervisor called to tell her that James Harrison was awake and asking for her. Sarah's book tumbled to the floor. She arrived still in her street clothes, breathless from running. James was sitting up in bed, looking thin and weak but unmistakably alive, his dark eyes alert and focused. When she entered the room, something in his expression cracked open. "You're real," he whispered. Sarah laughed, a nervous, joyful sound. "Of course I'm real, Mr. Harrison. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been given a second chance," he said. "And James, please. Just James." Over the next few weeks, as James underwent physical therapy to rebuild his strength, he asked Sarah to tell him everything. About her mother's cancer, about the debt that kept her working double shifts, about her dreams of opening a community clinic someday where people could receive care regardless of their ability to pay. He listened the way she had listened to his silence, with complete presence and genuine care. What happened next stunned everyone at Mercy General. James Harrison, the ruthless businessman, liquidated several non-essential assets and established the Chen Medical Foundation, named for Sarah's mother. The foundation's first act was to cover all of Mrs. Chen's cancer treatments. The second was to pay off Sarah's student loans. The third was to fund the construction of 3 free community clinics in underserved neighborhoods, with Sarah named as Director of Patient Care. "I don't understand," Sarah said when James presented her with the paperwork in his hospital room, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this?" James looked at her with eyes that had seen the darkness and chosen light. "Because you taught me something while I couldn't move or speak or do anything but listen. You taught me that wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. That success isn't crushing your competitors, it's lifting up the people around you. You cared for me when I was nothing but a body in a bed. You gave me dignity when I had nothing to offer in return. That's the kind of person I want to be now. The person you already are." "I was just doing my job," Sarah protested. "No," James said firmly. "You were being human. That's not a job. That's a choice. And it's a choice I want to make every day for the rest of my life." 6 months later, Sarah stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first Chen Medical Foundation clinic, her mother beside her in remission, healthy and radiant. James was there too, no longer the hollow-eyed workaholic, but a man, transformed by suffering and saved by kindness. He'd restructured his entire company around ethical practices and employee well-being. He'd reconnected with his family. He'd learned to see sunrises not as time lost from work, but as the daily miracles Sarah had described. "You know what the strangest part is?" he told Sarah as they watched families stream into the new clinic for free care. "I thought I was building a legacy with my company, leaving my mark on the world. But I was just accumulating zeros in a bank account. This," he gestured at the clinic, at the children laughing in the waiting room, at the elderly couple holding hands as they registered for treatment. This is a legacy, and I never would have understood that if you hadn't shown me what it means to truly care for another human being. Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand the way she'd done every morning in that hospital room. We all need someone to believe in us when we can't believe in ourselves. You just happened to find your way back through kindness. Now you get to pass it forward. And he did. James Harrison never forgot the sound of Sarah's voice in the darkness, telling him that every sunrise was a chance to begin again. He lived the rest of his life proving her right, that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose compassion over competition, generosity over greed, humanity over ambition. The millionaire in the coma had died in that hospital bed, but the man who woke up was someone infinitely richer. He'd learned what Sarah had always known, that the most miraculous thing any of us can do is see the humanity in others and treat it as sacred, even when no one is watching, even when there's nothing to gain. Especially then, because that's when kindness becomes something more than a transaction. It becomes a transformation. And in the end, isn't that what we're all really seeking? Not to be saved by miracles, but to become them.